Some background information. I work in retail. The store I work at is not in the best neighborhood, and we stay open until 10 o'clock. After around 9, every employee, except the cashier, is usually busy with nightly closing tasks, so they are not on the sales floor. If they are, it is only briefly, perhaps to sweep or do something similar. This story takes place when my store was much slower, so we rarely had customers after 9. I was stationed at the register at the time, and I was 16 years old. Around 9:30 a.m. customer walked into the store. I greeted him as usual and asked if he needed help. He was really tall. I remember he was about 6'2", which was intimidating because I'm only 5'1". He also had a large scar across his face. I immediately got a bad feeling about him, but I could not refuse to help, just because someone looked sketchy. So I pushed the thought aside. He kind of smiled at me, looked me up and down, and then asked where the clearance section was. Clearance was located all the way at the back of the store, on a small out-of-the-way end cap. I had seen plenty of customers get lost trying to find it, so I offered to show him. As we walked to the back of the store, I noticed he was not keeping a normal distance. It was not until he leaned in close and hissed, "Hey girl, you know you got a really nice ass," into my ear, that I realized how close he was. I froze for a second, unsure of how to react. No customer had ever spoken to me so bluntly before. Without acknowledging what he said, I sped up and pretended I had not heard him. When we reached the clearance section, I turned around and he was much closer than I expected. He smiled, but something about it was unsettling. "Are there any cameras here?" he asked. By this point, I was feeling very uneasy. I knew the other employees were in the back, counting money, and there were no real cameras in this part of the store. However, there was a fake security camera dome nearby, so I pointed to it. In a shaky voice I said, "Yes, there are a few." His expression darkened. He looked angry. I did not say anything else, and quickly walked back to the counter, keeping an eye on him the entire time, so he could not sneak up on me. Eventually, he came up to the front. He did not buy anything, but he leaned over the counter and whispered to me, "Are there any cameras up here, sweetheart? Would anyone see if I did anything to you right now?" Panicking, I looked up at the actual security cameras above us and blurted out, maybe a little too desperately, "Yes. We have a monitored system. There are cameras right there." He looked frustrated again, but stepped back slightly. "Fine," he growled. "How about I come back another time and find you, when there are no cameras? Then you'll see what I do to you." I was terrified at the time. I did not have a car, and often had to wait outside for my ride. After closing, the parking lot cameras were terrible quality, so I knew that if you waited, there was a real chance he could find me in an area without surveillance. I just stared at him, unable to speak. Eventually, he smirked and walked out. As soon as he left, I called my manager and begged for someone to come sit with me until closing time. Unfortunately, my request was refused, and I was left alone for the last 15 minutes. Thankfully, the store closed without incident, and no one was waiting outside. When I left, I made sure to tell a few co-workers about their encounter, just in case something happened. I was scheduled to be off for the next 2 days, so I tried not to think about it too much. When I returned to work, another manager, one I was closer to, pulled me aside and brought me into the office. He showed me a video from the security cameras. "Hey, is this your guy?" he asked. I nodded, and his expression became serious. "He has come in the past 2 nights. looking around the store for you. I was speechless. It was one thing to be threatened, but knowing he was actively trying to find me was horrifying. After that, management made sure I was never left alone at work. Thankfully, since I was still a minor, the man never returned after that, and nothing else came of it. I still work at the same store now as a manager myself. Not much phases me anymore, since plenty of strange things happen in retail. However, I do wonder if he was only trying to scare me, or if you really planned to do something worse. Either way, scar-faced man was a little too curious about camera placement. Let's not meet again. This story begins in June. My partner Johnny comes upstairs and finds a cute how. I'm checking him out on OkCupid, henceforth referred to as OKC. I'm confused as I haven't logged in lately, like in months. How could I have been looking at his account? I log in and check it out. There's a list of about 7 people who have been checked out from my account today. Johnny is one of them, and also someone I work with. Well, that's embarrassing. Nope, it wasn't me. Time to change my password. The next day at work, I made sure to bring it up and laugh about the fact that my OKC account was hacked to the person who was on my viewed list. I didn't want him thinking. I actually looked at his account. We were too closely together, and I already get the impression he may see me as more than his boss. It always pleased him that his luggage tags printed his middle name and first initial as Christy. This is not the type of person who should see his name written out like he's God's gift to earth. I'll refer to him as Chris. Chris just laughed off though. Okay, see hacking comment I made. I found it strange that he had no questions or comments on the subject. Most people would at least ask if I change my password, but nothing from Chris. I brushed off the situation. A few days later, I was out of the office for work. Johnny messaged me saying it happened again, that I checked him out on OKC. No, I didn't. But I changed my password again. July, it's a weekend. I'm having a lazy morning in bed with Johnny. I get a Facebook notification. Your account has been logged into from a new location. The IP address points to Chris's hometown. My heart's racing. What the heck is going on? I take care of the Facebook password and screenshot the notification. Later that night, I get a text from Chris. Happy 4th boss, LOL. I assume he's drunk and worried about being caught, having his access to my Facebook revoked so quickly. No, it can't be him doing this. It's just coincidence, right? Johnny is convinced it's Chris. But that means someone I work with on a very small team is targeting me. This will make work nearly impossible. I can't talk to anyone at work about this. I'll have no way to run my department. The situation will get minimized. Chris drank a lot. I'd seen it at work events or when we travel. Just the two of us, he often got out of hand. But everyone brushed it off. Comments like he's young, it was funny. We've all had those nights. But as long as you show up to work the next day, it's fine. I brought it up to him once. Hey Chris, you need to be more cautious about how much you drink at work events. He didn't speak to me for 3 days. I offended him. His interpretation was that he's not allowed to have fun at work events. He told me when he finally snapped at me. I recoiled. He's 3 times my size, and we're in a secluded space at work. One time while traveling with just the 2 of us, I got very sick. I told him I couldn't make it out for dinner. So, Chris offered to pick something up from a nearby store. He knocked on my room door and handed me the water. He got me. He tried to make small talk. As I thanked him and indicated I was going to lay down, It was apparent by his stance in my hotel room doorway that he wanted to come in. He moved an inch closer and I said goodnight. To shut my door and locked every lock I could. It wasn't the only time he made me feel uncomfortable. I hadn't noticed any other accounts being hacked. For a while I was cautious around Chris. Even dissociated when I could. I avoided work outings if he was going. I would back out of lunch plans that he decided to attend once he knew I was going. But we often had to work very closely. We were a team after all. I couldn't do my job without him, and he couldn't do his job without me. November. Johnny was online checking out his Fat Life account. One evening he saw I was also online, via the old messenger that used to have. Johnny asked me if I was logged in. I wasn't again. My heart's racing. It's different this time though. The violations are beginning to feel commonplace. Normal expected. But this hacking is extreme. No one outside of my Felt Life friends knows about this account, definitely no one I work with. And there are some faceless nude photos of me there. I reached out to Felt Life. They gave me the IP address of the last login. It's the same as the Facebook hack crap. I can't avoid this anymore. I can't pretend it's just coincidences anymore. But I need proof it's Chris. All I have is an IP address and intuition. I can't take that to HR, the police maybe. Will they help or will it make matters worse? If they need to contact my employer, I start looking into the login history of any account. That tracks it. My bank account. Why is there an iPhone logging into a daily? I don't have an iPhone, but Chris does crap. This is real, it's happening. I don't know what to do. I'll call the bank while I'm at work and ask them about the unknown login. Chris is at his desk right next to mine. The conversation is easily overheard. I hang up with the bank and they can't help. Chris didn't say a thing. Under normal conditions, a co-worker would inquire, well, is everything okay? Did you change your password? Did any money go missing? But nothing from Chris. So out of character. He's always interested in my personal life. The next weekend I wake up to a phone call. The caller is calling for my phone number. My heart skips a beat, but I answer. No one responds, I just hear breathing. That's it, I've had it. I'm losing my sanity. I spent weeks, months, researching IP addresses and how I might be able to use the only info I have. I've lost sleep, I can't focus at work. And Johnny is worried about me and my safety. I am too. But what can I do? Johnny suggests we go to the police and I don't want to. But I'm at a dead end, I agree. The officer is kinder and more receptive to my situation than I expected. This serves as a reminder to me that this is a big deal. I shouldn't minimize it in my own thoughts. She takes the report, every detail. They will use the IP to subpoena the ISP. Weeks go by. The officer on my case claims there's no crime. The ISP records were never obtained. December. My work email keeps doing this strange thing. Messages I've read keeping marked as unread. Weird. Is it him? Or just the multiple devices I used to check it on? I don't know, I can't tell. The server doesn't keep a log in history that I can see. Should I talk to the department? I know them well, they will help. But that would make this situation real and known. At work. No, not yet. I can't bring myself to do it. I can't do this anymore, my heart is constantly racing. The slightest noise sends me into panic. I get a security camera from my front door and worry a bit less when I hear the door slam from the wind door. When the dogs bark at something they hear, I'm becoming comfortable living in fear, as much as it's impacting my health. At least I have the pepper spray Johnny got me. I carry it whenever I'm outside. Chris and I have a shared account we use for work. Maybe I can get an IP address from that. If it matches, that's some proof, right? Dead ends. What if I send him an IP tracker? I've learned. You can place an invisible pixel in an email. It will send you the IP address of where it was read. All I have of Chris is his work email and to Gmail. I test both on myself first. Of course. I can't take the risk of him figuring out I'm onto him. Damn it, our work email blocks it. And Gmail reroutes to their headquarters. Another dead end. More hours, days, and weeks pass. I've called private investigators. They are impressed I've tried. The tactics that they already have at their disposal. I feel confident that I'm doing all I can. But more lost that the professionals can't help. February. One last attempt. It's a week before I have a 7-day out-of-country trip with Chris. It's with a large group this time. But I'll still be working very close. Too close with him. I send Chris an email with a shortened link. That will track what IP address it was clicked on from. I've tested this, it seems to work. But I'm shaking. What if this tips him off? What if he knows I'm onto him and he attacks me at work? What do I send him to get him to click? I find a local event that this particular breed of neckbeard would be interested in. Hey, Chris saw this and thought you'd be interested. 5 minutes later, Chris replies. Pure panic, no excitement. Maybe a mix of both sets in. I don't care what the reply says. I check the IP tracker, it got a hit. I'm shaking, I can barely type or hold my phone. It's the same IP address as the Facebook. And felt life hack, I got it. I have the proof I need. It's Chris who's been stalking me via my accounts. My intuition was right. As much as I didn't want it to be confirmed as him. There's relief awaits. Been removed, but then it sets back in. What do I do now? Go to HR. Back to the police, we've got that trip coming up. I need my team there to do the job. I'll wait until after I'm back. It's not that bad, I'm used to living like this now. Johnny thinks I'm insane for considering it. He's right, I am. I've lost touch with reality. The situation has me unable to determine what levels of uncomfortable one canon should live with. After a night of debate, I've made my decision. I won't wait, I'll do it now. I text my boss Jay the next day asking him to meet me for lunch on Sunday. I need to talk to you away from the office. This is not a normal request. We're close at work, but this is bizarre to him. He tells me I'm scaring him. I wish I could tell him not to worry. The following day we meet for lunch. I'm so nervous I could vomit. This is it, this makes it all real. Now I tell him everything. I'm worried he may minimize the issue. Chris is just a kid, he didn't mean anything. I'll talk to him tomorrow. After I finish speaking, Jay is at a loss for words. We have a plan in place to take this to HR. Tomorrow, and he's already helping me find someone to replace Chris. On our work trip. Again, I'm relieved and nervous at the same time. It's all going down tomorrow. 7 months of living in fear. And finally, I can see an end. Monday, my pepper spray is in my pocket. I picked out a work outfit that would conceal it. Today, Jay calls me, asks me a question. I don't remember what. But I take it as an invitation to go to his office. Anything to get away from the person I now know. Without a doubt has been hacking and stalking me. Jay wasn't expecting me but understood. The department head is in his office. Jay is about to inform him of my situation. Having my story told by a third party is surreal. I fill in the details where needed and give them the folder of evidence I've collected to take to HR screenshots. IP addresses. Written accounts of the timeline up to this point. The emails from Chris confirming his involvement. And the info from the IP tracker. The day is a haze. I was at HR's office at least twice. Saw the police drive through the campus. And had to fight my way with the HR director. He didn't feel I had enough evidence to prove. The email I sent to Chris's Gmail was actually the Chris that worked here. I dug through my work email. Bam, he mailed my work email from his Gmail account once. Enough evidence for our non-believer. Hours go by, it's almost 3 p.m. What the heck is going on? If I keep leaving my desk, Chris will know something's up. I can't call HR and ask, he'll hear the conversation. Chris walks over to me, oh shit. He says he's shoving his work phone in my face. Too close for comfort. He got an invite to go to HR for 4 p.m. I'm screaming inside. No one else is around. If he's going to do something to me, now is the time. That notice is the forewarning of being fired. That's how they do it at my job. I manage to look concerned and tell him, I'll let you know if I get one. Insinuating maybe our team is being let go. Not just him. He walks away, no idea where to. I sit at my desk shaking in fear. I don't know when he will return. How could HR betray me like this? They know the situation, damn it. They should have warned me. They were about to send it. I could have fled, I could have gone somewhere safe. Mike stops by my desk just to say hi. And offer me some leftover catering. I can't eat right now, but in this moment, Mike has offered me so much more than the leftovers. He has no idea what's going on, but can see in my face something is wrong. I asked to walk back to his office with him. Chris will never find me there. An hour or forever passes by. It's got to be done by now. I know Chris will be escorted back to gather his things. I do not want to be there for that. I sneak to Jay's office, he checks the area for me. Chris is gone, Jay heard from HR. As per HR, I am not allowed to speak to anyone. As to why Chris was fired. What the heck, are they serious? This leaves me so vulnerable. If Chris decides to come back to work, no one would stop him. In fact, they would welcome him with open arms. And time left looking like the one who fired the nice, quiet kid. Later that week, the IT department took a few extra days to gather Chris's devices. I had time to look through them during that period. The days before our trip were filled with so much discovery. Not just what I found on his computer, but what I learned from the people around me. The day after he was fired, I looked into his laptop. The IT team had no issues getting me into his files. I was Chris's boss and I needed his work. His pictures folder had a lot of personal stuff. Stupid memes, vacation pictures, screenshots of the naked cam girls he chatted with, and me. Some pictures I had never seen before and some I had. The pictures I was familiar with were from a cruise I went on months earlier with Johnny. Only these were the ones I deleted. I had a GoPro set to take pictures every 10 seconds. That hung from my wrist. While walking around, I inadvertently took close ups of my backside. In a swimsuit. After importing my vacation pictures, I deleted those from my computer. But were they still on the card? Then there were some pictures from my Google account. Well, it was a picture of a picture on a screen. He got into my Google account too. Why didn't I catch that one? There were also pictures I had never seen. Photos taken around the office and done work trips. Me at my desk, me bent over setting up gear. A close-up of a hint of cleavage shot from above. His phone was more of the same. A close-up of my backside while he sat behind me. Me struggling with a navy rack in a closet. while in a dress. A video from under a table during a meeting, while I wore a skirt. Zoomed in upskirt photos. Pictures of dates I had written on a post date. Pictures of my phone settings, showing my Fat Life account. The nausea set in again. I remembered all these moments. In the pictures he'd taken of me, him nonchalantly on his phone, looking like he was slacking off or answering an email. Little did I know, he was filling his spank bank with images of me during work hours and keeping a record of my days off. What a creep. I got into his browser history. It was sickening. He researched how to hack someone's text messages, stalked to friends of mine on Facebook, as well as my partner. He got into my Amazon Gmail, Facebook Fat Life, work email OK, Cupid and bank account. He read old emails of past relationships, looked at the places I visit, and stalked images from events I go to. There was hard evidence now. I took it to the local police near work. They couldn't handle it, so I went to the county prosecutor's office. Most people wouldn't think of that, but it was suggested by Johnny's friends. They had a computer forensics department that could handle the case. I met with an amazing detective. He took my packet of evidence and listened to the whole story. It's becoming easier to tell the story, especially when I focus on the facts. At my office, I learned more about Chris, how he slandered me to my coworkers. I knew I couldn't tell the people I worked with why Chris was fired, but for my safety, I had to tell the few people, just the ones close to me. Once they knew the story, I heard things like, Chris would complain I didn't pay him enough. He lied and said he made half of what he actually did. To co-workers, I even fought to get him above average raises. For 2 years, he lied and said I would withhold work from him. They usually responded by telling him to talk to my bosses or HR. Obviously, he never did. You can't take lies to HR and directors. He spread lies around the office, coercing co-workers to take his side, when I wasn't even aware there were sides to be had. From these people, I learned more about Chris's obsession with me. He craved power over me. He showed them my Fat Life profile, bragged about how compatible we were on OCake, and even talked about being obsessed with my partner. He told them how he tried to catfish me on Reddit. I couldn't blame them though. Chris laid the groundwork in some gaslighting on them. To them I was the bad person and Chris was their friend. Chris was very good at playing the victim, and never took any responsibility for his actions. 9 months went by. I followed up with the detective often. It took a while to subpoena his devices from my company and run forensic analysis. In early September, I got a call from the detective. They had arrested Chris. They showed up early in the morning at his home, where he still lived with his parents, and admitted to everything. He had taken the card from the GoPro and recovered the images. He got my passwords. Once while I walked away from my computer, he went through my phone when it was left at my desk. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall. The shock to his family, realizing the type of person he actually is, and seeing him cower while in handcuffs, face to face with what he'd done. No more hiding behind a computer screen. I was on vacation when this happened. I remember thinking, it's not long now until everyone at work will know. He has a court date set, and by then it'll be public record. I couldn't stop people from knowing after that, but I didn't have to wait long. Later that day, co-workers started sending me a link. Hey, didn't you work with this guy? What a creep. The link was to the county prosecutor's PR page, announcing Chris's arrest, mugshot and all. I came back to work and was able to let the truth come out. It was liberating. It took another 9 months for his final court date. During that time I worked with the prosecutors to decide how I wanted to proceed. I opted for a probation period instead of going through a trial and fighting for jail time. While Chris deserved jail time, he wasn't worth my time or effort, and a trial would have given him a slim chance of getting off scot-free. Also, this way he would receive much-needed counseling. 3 years with no contact with me, 3 years of sexual offense counseling, and 3 years of check-ins with a probation officer. This way I could at least hope that he would come out, understanding that what he did was unacceptable and, fingers crossed, would never do it to another living being again. I knew there was no chance of rehab in jail. The hearing eye, of course, was nervous. I didn't want to see Chris, but I knew that whatever I was feeling, he was feeling 1,000 times worse. I didn't have to go, but I knew I'd regret it if I didn't. With my fiancé Johnny at my side, I watched as he got up in front of the judge, after crying in the courtroom, and agreed to the terms of his sentence. His mom glared at me the whole time, as though this was all my fault. So that's where he gets it from. This is my story about being stalked. Dealing with this has been difficult, and throughout the ordeal, I felt out of control. So I'm sharing this to gain control over my story. This story is long because it spanned over 2 years, so I've split it into parts to make it easier to read through part 1. Several years ago, I moved abroad to begin a 2-year study course. When I arrived at my apartment, I met 3 of my roommates. Sam was funny and sarcastic, while Billa and Poppy were both nice sorority-type girls. We decided to go out for dinner, and I offered to invite our 4th roommate from room 1C next to mine. Sam warned me not to invite her, saying she was odd. I was worried because I didn't want to live with a bunch of catty girls. How were they fighting in less than a day? I smiled and told Sam that she just made a bad first impression, and that I would invite her to get to know her better. Sam grumbled as I left the kitchen. Approaching the door next to mine, I knocked and the door opened. A short, petite girl with long, brown hair and a childlike face stuck her head out. I introduced myself and invited her to dinner. The girl's face brightened at my invitation, as she nodded in agreement. Our excitement about the new school year kept us lively. As we arrived at the restaurant, I decided to befriend the girl in room 1C. Since we were sharing a bathroom, I learned that her name was Nellie. We were the same age, from the same state and in the same program. I ordered a Jack and Coke, and Nellie leaned into me and asked if I actually drank alcohol. I nodded, thinking her question was odd. We were both in our 20s, of course I drink alcohol. Nellie focused her attention on me while we ate. As I got to know Nellie, I kind of felt bad for her. She was born in Sri Lanka but immigrated as a kid. Since she had an accent and a lisp, I assumed she was bullied. Nellie was different from me. She was shy and claimed not to have hobbies or friends. But I figured that since we were in the same program, I could befriend her. I asked if she wanted to sit with me in class, and she happily agreed. I felt content knowing that I was befriending her, like I was doing a good deed. Part 2. My first 2 weeks abroad went smoothly. I got used to my surroundings, made friends, and got along with my roommates. Sam, Billa, Poppy, and I would often cook and eat dinner together, while chatting about our days. Nellie and I got along, but she was socially awkward. I made it my goal to befriend her, which was easy, because we sat together in lectures every day. We even opened our bedroom doors in unison. I would open my door. Then Nellie would open hers and ask me where I was going. One night I left my room to go grocery shopping. When Nellie's door opened and she asked to join me, I agreed, and she hurriedly put on her sandals and neon pink coat. I walked through the aisles, and Nellie silently followed closely behind me. Eventually I found everything I needed, but Nellie said she wasn't buying anything. After I paid for everything, we began to exit the store and the alarms went off. I stopped to show the security guard my receipt, and he looked in my bags, confirming that I had not stolen anything. I didn't think much of this incident, but when I stood at the front of the store with Nellie, for the fourth time, as my bags were searched by security, a thought crept into my mind. The alarms never rang when I was alone or with friends. They only rang when I was with Nellie. I shook my head. Nellie couldn't be stealing. I was with her the whole time. She was a perfectly nice, normal girl, and I was rude to think anything contrary. Part 3. The harmony in the apartment only lasted 2 weeks. One morning I shuffled into the bathroom and saw that the toilet was completely filled with 2 or 3 rolls of dry, unraveled toilet paper spilling onto the floor. However, what concerned me the most was the huge wad of hair that sat directly on top of the toilet paper. I knew then that it was Nellie who had done this. She was the only other person with a bathroom key, and her hair color was a match. I tried to think of any reason that Nellie would do this. Maybe she clogged the toilet, then stuffed it with toilet paper to hide her business. But that didn't explain the wad of hair. I couldn't harp on the issue though, so I made a maintenance request to have someone unclog the toilet. And when I came home from class, the toilet was unclogged. I studied for 2 hours before going back to the bathroom. I was annoyed when I found the toilet clogged again, and toilet paper, hair, and all this obviously wasn't a mistake anymore. And now we were out of toilet paper. I knew I had to say something, but I didn't want to directly confront Nellie about this awkward topic. I sent a passive, non-aggressive text. Hey, if something goes wrong with the toilet, can you make a maintenance request right away, please? I sent the message careful not to make it accusatory. I didn't want there to be tension with Nellie, especially since she still sat with me in class. Nellie never acknowledged the situation. She still opened her door with mine, hung out with me, and sat with me in class. For the next 2 months, I just dealt with the constant toilet paper and torn out hair. I tried sending more text, but it didn't help. Nellie would clog the toilet. I'd make a maintenance request. A staff member would clean Nellie's mess, and then she would do it again. Eventually, after 12 clogged toilets, I was so annoyed that I decided to confront Nellie. Nellie, I know you're clogging the toilet and you need to stop. If you do it again, I'm going to report you. I pressed send as I walked to class. I decided that I wouldn't sit with Nellie anymore. I had different friends to sit with who didn't clog my toilet. As I sat down with Reagan and Charlotte, I felt bad seeing Nellie sit alone across the lecture hall. I promised myself that I'd still be friends with her, and that everything would be fine. Part 4. I was happy that the holiday break was soon, and that now they never addressed me not sitting with her. My message had worked. Nellie stopped clogging the toilet, and we were still friends. But I came home one day in early December, and my nose is scrunched in disgust. There was a sickly sweet, rotten yogurt-like smell coming from Nellie's room. I didn't want to confront Nellie so soon after messaging her about the toilet. So for 2 weeks I avoided the problem. I didn't address the issue until 2 weeks later. when all of our food started to rot, almost immediately after buying it. Bill, San, and Poppy were complaining about how maintenance hadn't found the source of what was causing our food to rot. When I brought up the horrible smell and an accompanying fly infestation, the girls went to smell the hallway outside of Nellie's room and returned a minute later, coughing and gagging. We discussed what may be causing the smell, when Sam brought up seeing Nellie at 2 a.m. skipping through the woods. Sam was heading back from the club, and Nellie was skipping around like a possessed a doll, according to Sam. As we spoke, Nellie entered the kitchen and everyone felt quiet. Sam bluntly asked Nellie what the smell in her room was, and Nellie just silently shrugged her shoulders. Annoyed by this, Sam stood up and grabbed Ellie's arm, guiding her into the hallway as the rest of us followed, covering our noses with our sleeves. Nellie claimed not to smell anything, but her eyes were darting rapidly between the three of us. Sam made a sarcastic comment toward Nellie as we returned to the kitchen without her. Sam was a bit harsh, and part of me felt bad for Nellie. At least Christmas would be relaxing. I spent 2 weeks at a friend's house with her family for Christmas. They were all welcoming, so I didn't miss home too much. My friend knew about Nellie, so she bought me scented candles for Christmas. When I returned to the apartment, I felt rested and equipped to face the new year. Part 5. My January exams were online and pretty easy, so I was surprised when Nellie texted me, asking if I would cheat with her on the final exam. I politely declined, and she asked if I would go to lunch the next day. I had no plans, so I accepted her invitation. I spent a lot of time with her, but she never actually spoke much. Despite everything, I wanted to get to know her better. Once we were at the restaurant, I racked my brain for things to talk about with Nellie, attempting to break the awkward silence. I asked her what her favorite show was. Nellie told me that she loves to watch Sophia the First. I was confused. Sophia the First is a Disney toddler show that came out when we were teens. Why was she watching a show for toddlers in her 20s? I didn't know how to expand on what she said, so I changed the topic and asked what her favorite hobby was. Nellie giggled and said, "I do this a lot actually. I listen to you through the walls. They're so thin I barely put my ear against it. I hear you talk to your parents every day." I tried not to look horrified as I sat there confused and a little scared. Nellie started laughing. "You're like a mother, but I'm an aunt and we're sisters together." I smiled awkwardly and nodded. I had no clue how to respond. In a desperate attempt to change topics, I asked her about her childhood in Sri Lanka. Nellie slammed her fist on the table, sending my rice flying off the plate. She yelled that she was not from Sri Lanka, and I apologized even though she had definitely told me she was from Sri Lanka. Nellie began to laugh again. "I have plans for us tonight. We'll go to the graveyard and walk around. You'll be scared, but I'll have fun with you." Nellie's eyes were wide open, and her mouth seemed to stretch more than usual. She was scaring me, and I didn't want to be rude, so I said I'd invite our other roommates too. At that, Nellie let go of her fork and quickly moved her hand onto mine. She insisted that we had to go alone. I pulled my hand back, attempting to hide my grimace, and stuttered out a disingenuous maybe. Now they leaned back, slowly rolling her head from one side to the other, and mumbled about how fun it will be. The rest of our lunch was silent. When we got back to the apartment, I said goodbye to her and went into my room. I didn't call my parents that night. I went to bed early, hoping to quell my anxiety and get some much-needed rest. Part 6. The next day I did laundry and went shopping. And by 2 p.m., I was meal prepping for the week. I jumped when Nellie asked me to go to the movies with her. I hadn't heard her come into the kitchen, but there she stood, her head down and eyes turned up. Staring at me, I declined a request, but she repeated her question. I politely declined, once again trying to offset her bizarre vibe. Nellie didn't respond and retreated back to her room, then left for the movies. An hour later, I went to the bathroom, and when I opened the door, I gagged immediately. The smell was bad, but the sight was worse. The walls of floor's door, sink and toilet were covered in smeared poop and blood. I could see distinct handprints, and I closed the door trying not to puke. I was shocked that Nellie had done this, but my shock quickly turned into anger, and I messaged Nellie, "What you did is weird and disgusting. You need to clean it. I'm going to report you." I pressed send. I no longer cared about being friends with Nellie. I felt gross, so I went to our shower room next to the bathroom. But Nellie ruined that too. There was toilet paper shoved in the shower drain, and wads of toilet paper crusted onto the walls. I was livid at this point, but I had to wait until Monday to report her. So I laid down to take a nap. 2 hours later, I was awoken by Nellie slamming the front door. I heard her footsteps until her feet were visible through the crack under my door. I expected her to knock, but she didn't. Instead, Nellie began to continuously chirp like a bird. She briefly paused and then began twisting my doorknob, in unison with her chirps. I stood there, unnerved as Nellie did this for 5 minutes. Then Nellie began to rapidly knock on my door and call my phone 7 times. She called, hung up, then called again, while still rapidly knocking. Nellie then started ramming her body into my door, over and over again. The shock of it made me stumble back onto my bed. Then, as suddenly as it started, Nellie stopped, her feet still visible under my door. My phone buzzed and I slowly unlocked it, staring down in horror at Nellie's text. The cockroach screamed, "Why do this to me?" "Because you couldn't be positive. In a negative situation," the doctor said. The doctor pulls off the cockroach legs and it cries. The doctor has no choice. The cockroach must be killed and its family taken away. You are the funny cockroach. I was terrified as Nellie began to knock and chirp. I was scared to call the police because I was on a visa, and if they didn't believe me, I could be deported for making a false report. I texted Poppy and Billa, who had heard everything. Nellie stood there for an hour straight, occasionally pushing her fingers through the crack under my door. When Billa's boyfriend arrived, his presence scared Nellie away. We met up and talked about what had happened. Before going to bed that night, I barely slept. I was too scared. Part 7-1. Too many followers. I woke up the next day, anxious about the previous night's events. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't that bad. However, as I peeked into the bathroom, its condition suggested otherwise. Charlotte and Reagan were skipping class, so I sat alone. I saw Nellie enter the room, bypass her regular seat, weave through the aisles and inspect each row. As she passed, I sank in my chair as she got closer, horrified by the realization that she was searching for me. With the last night's memories fresh in my mind, I froze in fear when Nellie found me and robotically bent down to meet my eye line. As she sat next to me, with her mouth twisted into a sinister smile, I did nothing as she sat next to me, too scared to move and worried that any tiny shift might cause her to attack. When the professor dismissed us, I shot up, frantically packing my things. Nellie asked where I was going, and I lied to her saying I was going to the cafe. I didn't want her to know where I was. So I went home for lunch, and as I stood in the kitchen, the door opened. You weren't at the cafe. Nellie's eyes darted up to me. She was looking at a knife on the table. I apologized and told Nellie my plans had changed. My heart raced as I asked her if she liked the lecture. Nellie didn't respond, she just stared. Her head tilted and her mouth agape. I asked again, but she still didn't answer. I faced her, afraid she'd use the knife on me. She glared so intently that her veins were protruding. She stood there for 10 minutes before leaving. Later on, I walked to the library and froze. As I saw Nellie's pink jacket behind me, I turned to see Nellie staring at me with vacant eyes. She followed me into the library, up to the 3rd floor, and then sat directly behind me. With her threat still fresh in my mind, I moved to a different spot. But Nellie followed me. I tried again, but she still followed. I was scared to be isolated in a library with her. So I decided to leave. I quickly weaved through the bookshelves, desperately trying to reach the lobby. But Nellie matched my pace. I was nearing a heart attack when I ran into my guardian angel, Sam. Nellie's following me, I blurted out. Sam looked at Nellie, who had stopped 5 feet behind me. Sam nonchalantly told Nellie to piss off. I was surprised when Nellie did just that. After Sam and I spoke for a bit, my phone buzzed. It was Nellie inviting me to the graveyard that night. Sam told me that I'd be smart to move out. And she was right, I needed to report Nellie and move out. It wasn't safe for me to live in that apartment anymore. I needed to get away. Part 8: Reagan's Refuge. I went to Reagan's apartment, as she was the closest person I had to family. While I was abroad, she gave me refuge, while listening to me retail the last 48 miserable hours of my life. She reassured me that I could stay with her. And as I held back tears, my phone buzzed. Sam texted that she needed help and to go to the apartment as soon as possible. I was hesitant to go back in there, but I couldn't just abandon Sam. So I grabbed my things and told Reagan I'll be back soon. I walked to my apartment and stared up at it, feeling a lot like the priest in the Exorcist movie. When I got to my door, I was immediately greeted by my 3 roommates, distraught faces. I followed them into the apartment, and my eyes grew wide as Sam pushed open the kitchen door to reveal a truly demonic sight. Huge amounts of congealed red and orange liquid pulled across the floor, leading beneath our table, where a small bird laid dead, with its wings outstretched and its head missing. I felt sick. The windows didn't open, so it didn't get in here by itself. Nellie had either found this bird and brought it into the kitchen, or she killed and decapitated a living bird, then put it in the kitchen. I didn't like either of those options. I assured my roommates that I would report Nellie that night, and that's exactly what I did. I spoke to the school safety board, and things moved fast. I discovered that Nellie had lied to us about her name and age. Officials in hazmat suits came to clean the kitchen. In Nellie's room, the board had me send them photos of myself daily, in case Nellie killed me and they had to identify me. I quickly moved out, and since Nellie avoided the other girls, they decided to stay. I declined to submit Nellie for expulsion because I felt bad for her and thought that moving would stop her obsession with me. I was incredibly misguided. Part 9: I was happy that my new roommates were normal, and no Nellie incidents had happened for 2 weeks. I did, however, have a large uptick in random daily Facebook and Instagram follower requests from blank profile users. I knew who was behind this. but I was avoiding any Nellie-related thoughts. I was having night terrors, and the more I thought about her, the worse they got. I blocked another user. As I sat down with Reagan and Charlotte in an almost empty lecture hall, Charlotte nudged me as Nellie entered the room. Bypassing her usual seat, I felt myself freeze up as she entered our row and began walking toward me, staring at me with her dead eyes. "Don't sit next to me," I said. Shocked by my bravery, Nellie responded by sitting 10 seats down from me, not breaking eye contact, and I considered that a win. After class, I went home and then walked to the store. I forgot to grab a card, so I quickly turned around to fetch one and ran into someone standing directly behind me. It was Nellie. Did she follow me from my apartment? Does she know where I live? My heart stopped as I backed into another aisle, and Nellie followed. I walked to another aisle, but Nellie followed me, matching my pace, until I went to another aisle and she began to run. I ran away terrified, and Nellie only stopped when I reached the security desk. Security offered to call the police, but I declined and gave them my email to send me the footage of Nellie chasing me. I had to report Nellie, but since I still had a class that day, I decided to report her the next day. 2 hours later, as I waited for Reagan to walk with me to class, I caught Nellie staring at me across the street, but she didn't approach me and walked with a crowd toward campus. Minutes later, Reagan found me and we headed to class together. I walked beside Reagan past the buildings and alleyways until a rock caught in my shoe, and I bent down to fix it. Reagan switched to the right side of me to look at a billboard, and when I removed the rock, we began walking again. I turned my head to speak when Nellie jumped out of an alleyway and onto Reagan. Her hands were outstretched and clasped around Reagan's neck. Words can't explain how terrified I was. Nellie let go immediately and Reagan grabbed my arm. Walking forward, Nellie began walking shoulder to shoulder with me, her head turned to sideways at an unnatural angle. The look in her eyes was not human. Reagan told me to run and we bolted across the street. Nellie paused but walked away, traffic stopping her from crossing. We stopped and Reagan leaned against the fence. As I bent over and covered my mouth, try not to vomit. After a while we continued our walk to class in silence. We made it to the lobby and headed for the staircase, but Nellie stood at the bottom of it. "I won't let her walk behind me," I said, my voice shaking. Reagan nodded and we followed a large crowd. After Nellie walked upstairs, only to find her holding the door open for everyone. Nellie stared at me through the crowd until everyone but Reagan and I had passed through. "It's okay, you can go first," Reagan said, smiling at Nellie. I was shocked at how composed she was, and even more shocked that Nellie listened. When we sat down in class, Nellie tried to sit behind me, but someone was saving the seat for his friend. So Nellie laughed. I didn't pay any attention to that lecture. I sat there shocked and terrified, while Reagan hunched alone her seat, rubbing her neck. I felt horrible for bringing Reagan into this Nellie situation. I knew then that Nellie needed to be expelled, no matter what. Part 10. The next day, I reported Nellie to the Student Safety Board, and they raised the issue to the disciplinary board. I submitted a lengthy report detailing everything Nellie had done. I included Reagan, Billa, Poppy and Sam as witnesses, and provided photographic evidence of the threats, the calls, the smeared poop and blood, clogged showers and toilets, and the stalking. The next week I met with the disciplinary board to go over their conclusions. They informed me that they had reviewed my report, met with Nellie to give her a copy of my report, discussed my accusations, and he come to a conclusion. They acknowledged that everything I reported was factual, but they didn't think Nellie had any malicious intent, so they would grant a no-contact order. But Nellie wouldn't be expelled. I was completely perplexed by their conclusion and asked them what Nellie had said about all of this, but they refused to tell me anything. I was at a loss for words. I couldn't believe Nellie was given my full report, knew everything I had said, and knew the names of the witnesses. The school put us all in danger, yet they wouldn't allow me to know. If Nellie had even denied her actions, I was devastated. I felt my mind go numb. I knew at that moment that they didn't care. They were going to prioritize a predator. So with no other options, I agreed to the no-contact order. The worker tried to get me to sign a non-disclosure agreement, so I wouldn't speak about what Nellie did to me, or how the school dealt with my case. But I refused to sign it. The next day I received an email confirming that Nellie had agreed to the no-contact order. But I knew that meant nothing. Nellie wouldn't get help, and she would never stop stalking me. Part 11. My sophomore year was plagued by a relentless pattern of Nellie stalking me from place to place, sitting next to me in class, standing next to me in hallways, and staring at me daily. Her actions were so unnerving and obvious that multiple strangers warned me about her. I reported these incidents every time they occurred, and the school always responded by stating that they would remind Nellie of the no-contact order. They never took any further steps to help me. In sophomore year, Nellie found other roommates and in them new victims. She was evicted from an off-campus apartment, and her new roommates who once sat with her began to sit far away from Nellie. They looked terrified. They looked like me, having incidents happen weekly, and having to see Nellie daily made it impossible for me to move on. I was always in flight or freeze mode, terrified by what Nellie had done and still might do to me. I became a sunken-in, miserable and defeated version of myself. I wanted revenge. It was a natural result of the boiling rage I felt, now at a constant simmer, after Nellie was coddled by a university that failed to impose even a minor consequence for the terror she caused me. I wanted Nellie to suffer in the exact same way she made me suffer. I know if I had just stood up for myself at any point in those early months, I likely could have saved myself and others from suffering. Nellie was likely stalking me from the moment I met her. I just hadn't realized it, and it weighs heavily on me to know that I played a large part in my own suffering. No matter what I write, I can't begin to recreate the evil that radiated off of Nellie. I have daily night terrors. I don't go into new situations. I don't speak to new people. And I don't make friends. I'm not nice to strangers, because I don't want to invite something like this into my life again. Revenge came on graduation day, when Nellie's name didn't appear in the book of graduates. She had failed her second year. But despite everything, I couldn't help but think that I was a bad person for being content with Nellie failing. Maybe I was just happy that I could finally move on.